I have with me Badewonu Teju. Did I get that right?
Oh yes, in that exact order. It is Badewonu Teju. It's not Teju first, as most people would assume. Badewonu is actually my first name.
Okay, so I was looking at I was reading your Wikipedia entry this morning, and I saw stand-up comedian, writer, talk show host. I didn't see actor. What happened? They didn't include actor in your Wikipedia entry.
Well, you know how these Wikipedia things are. You do that thing years ago, and then you promise yourself you'll go back and edit it at some point, and then you never do, and all of that. So yeah, we probably, this is a reminder that we should go back and edit that thing.
Okay, so for those who are just encountering you now, what they know is Deep Dive podcast with Teju, right? Deep Dive podcast.
Yeah, that, I mean.
Okay, so may I add podcaster to your entry now?
Well, ẹ̀yin àgbà náà lẹ́bọ aṣọ ìgbà yín là ń dá fúngbà. So it is we're in the era of podcasting. I mean, when you consider that Trevor Noah, with all the machinery of the Daily Show behind him, he left that to go and start a podcast. We're in that era now, so that even if I was still in Nigeria and I had the Teju Babyface show, there's a degree to which I would have been greatly conflicted right now, that whether the best move was not to stop that and then go do a podcast. So yeah, I guess you can add podcaster, but in the end, it's just a talk show that goes to market faster. That's all a podcast is. It's a talk show that goes to the market. It's a product whose turnover time is faster than the traditional talk show. So I'll take it.
So now tell me about the transition from Teju Babyface show to Deep Dive.
Yeah, so first of all, let's establish the well, not the parameter. Let's establish how this interview came to be. I have not easily granted interviews. I am not easily granted interviews. So let's just establish that this is because of Almighty. Okay, I have turned down more interviews than I can count. But when Mighty calls you, you show up for Mighty. So I just want us to establish that for people to know who Mighty is, just in case they don't know. As the name, so the man is. It's Almighty. Let's just know that. Okay, so to answer your question, it was I didn't plan it that way. I was just taking a break when I was coming to the United States initially. I felt that the Teju Babyface show was so much to do at every point in time, just so much work, and I thought that I definitely needed a break. So this was me coming to the States for anything from between 6 months to 1 year, just to chill and reset. I do that every once in a couple of years, which is how my transitions have always been. That is how I stopped being an actor and became a comedian. It was how I went from just being a comedian to the Teju Babyface show. So I was going through one of those ablutions of the soul that I take regularly. Only that I did not know that COVID was going to come and extend that trip by another year. So it was at the end of that year that, as you know, everything had changed. Online had become more prominent than it ever was. It was not just something that we did on the side. Online had now become the thing. And so with all of that in mind, seeing the awesome things that boys were doing out of Nigeria, boys had arisen with the internet. I mean, they had essentially killed television, which was my forte. I mean, these boys had essentially killed TV. And so where people like us would have been running around trying to get our show on this TV station, and then you will run to Ibadan, try to get on a TV station in Ibadan, then you run to Abeokuta, and then we'd feel cool and feel like we were nationwide. These boys were sitting in Lagos, using their phones, uploading on the internet, and they were reaching the whole world. So I'm like, So we have to rethink this thing. And so I went through a long period, and it wasn't easy. When you do a show like that, when you do a big show like that, your tendency is to think that it will be a step down and that the world would judge you if you came from the big show to what was essentially, or what is essentially, a small show. Just an interview with one person. What happened to the audience and the band and the lights and the big set and all of that thing that made you feel very cool? You're not going to stop all that and come and do this small thing. So it wasn't easy for me, I must confess, for you. Yeah, but eventually it was either do that or not do anything. Because just when I was planning again to come back and start doing the big thing, then our third baby was on the way. So again, that wasn't going to work. So I'm like, okay, I should do this thing. So that's how the podcast just started. It was, you know what, at the very least, let me start doing this thing. And then when the baby is born, in fact, I did go to Nigeria. I did go to Nigeria to go and do the show. I told my wife, look, I can't be waiting. I've been waiting all these years to go back. I can't now wait again till the baby comes to term, and then you give birth, and then I wait for how long. So I'm going. So I did go. I went for about 2 weeks. And it occurred to me that what it was going to take for us to get the show back, it just wasn't, it was like, it wasn't necessary. You don't need to put in this amount of work to get the same level of output or even to get greater output. It's not just necessary. If I was going to do the show the way we're doing it, I was doing it purely for ego. And once I came to that decision, then the podcast was, it was a no-brainer.
One of the things I've learned from you, Teju, is that one has to kill one part of one's life or what one is doing to actually move on to the next level. So ordinarily for you, I wouldn't expect that moving from one stage to the other would be something that will be a life or death thing. But those around you, how easy was them to now see you, Teju Babyface the Teju Babyface show to what you are doing right now? Did people accept it immediately?
Yes, so that's the thing. First of all, it was hard for me to kill this one because the last time I tried to kill something to walk into something, it didn't exactly work out. So I've had no problems, as you rightfully alluded. I've had no problems killing stuff to go do stuff because it always works. When I kill something and go do the next thing, it works immediately. So what I tried to do initially was to kill the Teju Babyface show and go and do thought leadership, which was why I wrote the books that I wrote. I was going to be done with entertainment. I had no problems giving up the Teju Babyface show initially, and I was going to become an inspirational speaker, a motivational speaker. I was going to transition into that. But that did now not work with the alacrity or the speed with which all my other things had worked out. And that caused me to pause. It caused me to pause for a long time. In fact, if I'd gone through any challenges in my career, it was in the bid to make sure that that part worked, that I became a thought leader. I kept pushing that thing, but that thing wasn't exactly, I mean, it was working, but it wasn't working on the same level that entertainment was working. So I had to recalibrate. I mean, those who follow me a lot will be able to track the journey. There was a time when I stopped the Teju Babyface show briefly from 2014 to 2016. And so that was that period. So when it wasn't working, that was when I went back to now do the show again. So I was now, at that point, I had concluded that that whole thought leadership thing was at the very best just going to be an accompaniment to the Teju Babyface show, right? I didn't think it could stand alone. I knew I had to do it, but I didn't think I should kill the Teju Babyface show anymore. So now that it was the podcast time, you can understand that I had tried to kill this show before and it didn't work. And there are no answers. There's nobody in life to give you answers, especially when you're a successful person. Nobody can tell you exactly what to do. So I'm in this funk of mind where, was I born to do the Teju Babyface show? Is that my thing? Is that my calling? Am I running away from it? Is it that everything I had done up until that point was to bring me to that point? And having gotten to that point, I was supposed to stay with that thing. Sikiru Ayinde Barrister would say in many ways, in his many songs, that he thanked God that he found out what he was supposed to do with his life early, which was music, that he had also been mistaken earlier on and he had gone to join the army, but that he was thankful to God that he found people who quickly told him that the military was not his destiny and that music was, so that he now switched into music and he found it early and that he spent all his life pursuing that. So that was my thing. What if I was wrong? What if the Teju Babyface show was my thing? Maybe that's why the thought leadership was difficult. So now that I come to this point again, when I was considering killing it again or stopping it or pausing it to now go and do the podcast, what if it doesn't work? Because, I mean, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me, right? So why would I now kill it? Which is why I'm thankful for the whole American trip being stuck here because of COVID. Because between you and I, the only way that I was able to walk into that podcast was because I didn't have any other choice at the time. It's almost sure that if I was in Nigeria where I could still do the Teju Babyface show, you probably would not have heard of this podcast. Never. So, as to answer your question, how did those around me feel about it? That's the beauty of wanting to kill one level for another. If you're going to kill one level, especially a level on which you've been very successful, for the next level, you have to take time off. You cannot go from that to this immediately. It is not possible. Thus, the great teacher said that we do not pour new wine into old wineskins. It will burst. People will just refuse to accept you on your new level, which, by the way, is why my thought leadership did not work as much as I wanted it to work initially. It was because I was trying to step in immediately. You don't do that. The people will resist you. The only way they will accept you is if you take time away. When you take time away, they miss you so much because what they are actually attracted to in you in the first place is not the expression of your talent, which is what the talk show is, which is what the comedy is, which is what the MCing is, which is what the acting is, which is what the podcasting is. It is just what you're attracted to is the essence of me, not all those expressions. But people don't know that. So when you take time away, you give them time to miss you, so that when you return, in whatever form you return, they are just too glad to have you back. Then they will accept you. They have missed you so much that however you come, they are longing for your essence, so they will accept you, which is why I believe with all humility that as soon as we came out with the podcast, from the first episode, they accepted it. They had missed me. They had missed my essence. So it was like, look, anyhow you bring it, we will take it. So that's what happened.
Explain to me again, explain to me like somebody who doesn't know how you ended up in the US.
Okay, so it's several things that all work together. I had several reasons. First of all, I needed to get my family out. I'd become paranoid about the safety of my family. Yeah, it's that with thanks to God or the pantheon of gods or life or the universe, with thanks to the powers that control life, as the Omoluabi say, I want to lie, I want to learn. It is that the things that I do usually make news. So Teju Babyface gets married, it makes news. Teju Babyface and wife give birth to twins, it makes news, a lot of news, yeah? So when we had the twins, it had been coming for a few years, but as soon as we had the twins, my paranoia about security went into just overdrive, yeah? Because driving into where we used to stay in Maryland at the time, from the Mobile filling station, driving into Shonibara Estate, Shonibara, Maryland Estate, which is where we used to stay. From the Mobile filling station, they'd be hailing me. Everybody knew where I was staying. It wasn't, you could get to that Jesu Oyinbo street and just say, Munwa Ile Teju Babyface. I'm looking for where Teju Babyface, and they will take you there. So for me, I'm thinking, how is that even secure? Yeah. And of course, you could say, well, move to another part of the state and all of that. But I had a friend whose wife was kidnapped. My wife was attacked in traffic on a co-bridge. Windows of the car was smashed. The windows of the car was smashed. I had a friend whose wife was attacked at that junction of Mobile, 4 Points by Sheraton, and all of that. I just become paranoid. So I was like, whatever the case, let me move these guys abroad. I remember I was in London one day and I called a friend and I said, hey, because we're all friends. He and I and his wife went to Unilag together. So we're all friends before they got married. So I'm like, hey, let me speak to your wife. This was about 11. And I was like, oh, she's not back. She went out. She went to work, then she went to shop for groceries. And I remember in that moment, I thought to myself, what? She's not back at 11 in London, and you are saying it calmly like this. If my wife is not back at 11 in Lagos, then the panic that I'll be living in. In fact, what he had actually done was, let me call her phone. So he called her phone and her phone was off. And he said, oh, maybe her phone is dead. I'm like, if I call my wife at 11 in Lagos and her phone is dead, you don't even want to know the panic in which I will be living. So that was one part, yeah? I wanted to experiment with having the wife and kids out of the country, and then I do the shuttle back and forth. At the very least, let me try that for a couple of years. So that was the first thing. The second thing was, as I've said, I also needed time away to reset myself. Only that at the time I thought I was going to be taking 6 months to a year at most. That's what I thought. We had the whole TV machination, the whole TV machine. We had it on lockdown. I had my guys working for me. They knew when to take the tapes to TVC, AIT. We had the agency thing on lockdown. So I was able to take time off, which was what I'd been gunning for. My mentors had taught me that that you're beginning to approach success when, if you take time away, the machinery of your business does not grind to a halt. So I'd gotten to that point. So this was me again taking time away, and nobody was going to know because they were going to keep seeing the show on the air for months. Yeah, so those were the essential two things that precipitated my going away to the United States. Then third, frankly, I was also tired of going to the embassies. I was tired of submitting my passport for visas and being interviewed every time. In fact, when we wanted to have our twins, I remember that we were to renew our visas. It was Dropbox at that time. This was 2018. And I was going to be renewing my own US visa at that time for maybe the 5th time. My wife was going to be renewing for the 3rd time. I was the primary applicant. She was the dependent. So we dropped our passports. At that time, she was about 7 months pregnant. She needed to travel almost immediately, right? So we dropped the passports. It came back in about 2 weeks. They gave my wife, they renewed her visa, the dependent. Me, the primary, they said I should come for an interview. And we couldn't find the date until almost 2 months later. So my wife had to travel with me waiting in Lagos to go to the embassy. So the question was, what if they now deny me the visa? So you'll have these twins abroad and I'll be here in Nigeria. So we went through that whole thing. Maybe we should not go again. Let's have the kids in Nigeria. She completely refused. That, well, if that's what it comes to, if they deny me the visa, then too bad. So she went, and I went to the embassy on my own with the hopes that I'll get my visa renewed. And I remember standing in front of a person interviewing me, and she interviewed me, or was it he? I can't remember. I think it was he. He interviewed me like he had no idea who I was. He interviewed me like this was not the 5th time I was trying to renew my visa, or maybe even the 6th time. He asked me, who are you? What do you do? At some point, I wanted to tell him that, now. So I look, he interviewed me. I felt it wasn't just the way he was interviewing me. It was the fact that there were no chairs anymore. We had to queue and all of that. I just felt like, how have we gotten to this point where they hold so much power over us? So I remember leaving the embassy that day and thinking to myself that I must never do this again. I must never do this. There has to be a way. So again, I was trying to solve that particular challenge of the restrictions of the green passport too, as it were. So all those things dovetail together to precipitate my decision to come to the United States. There are many more things again. My 2 sisters are here. My mom, she has a green card. She was going to come here. My elder sister was going to come here. We have family base here as well. So all of that.
Interesting story. I remember that place you were staying in Maryland. I think that was where you did your 40th birthday, and I came there to interview you once. If you don't feel safe in a place like that, I mean, where would you have felt safe in Nigeria?
I don't think anywhere really. That was my point. It's not anywhere. Even if you feel safe at home, what about on the road? Yeah. So so these things would happen every day. I had a staff who was driving, and it really became freaky where in Lagos for me at that point, where if I'm stationary in traffic for even a minute, I start to fear. Why do I start to fear? Because I'm in traffic one day around Country Club. right? And the driver is driving. I'm sitting beside the driver, and this guy comes and knocks on the window and says to me, I'll never forget, so I mean, me trying to be I grew up in PWD just across the rail tracks, I just can't give you money. So I said to him that, to which the guy replied, I'll never forget. So show the Abrez ni gura wa ni go ba nsin abi. Show the Abrez ni for window down yara loju. She mo be gently nsin abi. And I laughed. That was funny to me, but he was speaking the truth. He could have easily have smashed the window as they do, as we hear the stories and all of that, and grabbed us in the shock and all of that. So I gave him some money and he left. And then this would happen time and time again. I was not just, happy with the situation, but you see, that was me. I can handle myself. I always believe I can handle myself. But the day my wife comes home, and you can Google it, it's on Google, Teju Babyface's wife attacked in traffic. The day my wife came home and the shards and the crystals of the shattered window of our SUV was on her, and they are stealing her bag and all of that, I just lost it, right? But I finally went into the paranoia overdrive when the twins were born. So if the twins had been in the car that day and they had smashed the glass, so that is how the shards of the glass would have, just watched on them. The projectiles would have hurled into these babies. That's two babies you're carrying. I mean, I just couldn't handle that anymore. So to now live that type of life in Nigeria that I would want, I would now have to employ mobile policemen and that whole, how it goes now. Mobile policemen and all. Who wants to live like that? Who wants to live like that? So I don't think it was a question of moving anywhere. And again, by myself, I am okay. But my wife Toby has always been like that. Toby is not a sit-at-home person, which is probably why I married her. Toby is very productive. She's very proactive. She's on the move. She's going to see a friend here. She's going to see somebody there. She's going to do an event there. Toby is that person. Toby is the person that believes that life is good, let's walk and all of that. So she's always out here going to do this, do that, do that. I'm the one who stays at home. So she's doing that with twins. And a lot of people know that I have twins. I think to myself, how hard is it for a criminal to think to himself that, okay, this is where Teju Babyface lives. We know he goes out, his wife goes out, usually every day about this time. They have twins. And I've watched this show. He knows many important people. Even if he claims he doesn't have the money. How about all these big people that he brings on the show? There's no how we will kidnap his wife and kids, and they won't bring money together to do it. So let's do it. That freaks me out. So that's it.
Okay, now, how easy? Okay, so now you're in the US now, and I've had you interview people. I've watched a lot of your podcasts, and they tell you what the experience has been like. Some of them not so easy.
Oh, by the way, sorry to cut in. Just to add to that thing that I say, people often say stuff like, and I believe this comes from a place of lack of thinking before speaking. Yeah. But we live in the world of social media where people will rush to speak before they think, as you can imagine. Right. So they will say stuff like, but no way is safe in the world. It's not as if America is perfectly safe. But that is actually correct. They're very correct. But it is a lack of depth of thought that makes them rush to ask that question. Because if you think about it, you will understand that we're not talking about the same thing, really. Because there's a reason why you did not ask me that question when I said that. It is because you are able to process thought. Your thought processing unit works at a high speed. So that's why you didn't ask me that question. Because anybody who thinks or anybody who has sense will realize that, yes, indeed, there's nowhere that is safe in the world. However, there is accountability. There's accountability and there's lawlessness. It is in this same US that gunmen take guns and go to school. People take guns and go to schools and kill kids, right? They kill teachers, they kill kids indiscriminately in the same US. So there's nowhere that is safe. In fact, when your kids leave for school, there's a degree to which you pray and say, God, please let them come back in the same US. However, there is accountability. As imperfect as the system is or might be, there is the understanding that this is not normal. Yeah. It is that when my wife was attacked in traffic in Lagos, for instance, and it was all over the news, not a single person in authority, not one person reached out to me. Friends did, friends from the UK did, friends from the US did, family members did. Not a single person in authority said, hey, this is Teju Babyface's wife. Let's reach out. Not one person. In fact, the clincher was that just about 300 feet from where they were attacked, there was a police checkpoint. And so my wife said that when they drove to that point, they said to the policeman, how can you claim not to have seen us attacked there? And the policeman said, well, we didn't see. Not only that, the policeman said that, well, there's a police station down the bridge there in Igomu, go and report. It's just, so for me, it was the fact that it seems that lawlessness, if you come now and you tell anybody in Lagos that your window was smashed in traffic, that is so what? So what? So what? Do you know how many times that happens on a daily basis? So it's for me, it was our acceptance of, it was our acceptance of brigandage or lawlessness as a way of life. I think that was what got to me. So I just need to be clear. There are no perfect places on the face of the earth, but it is the attitude of the people and the systems to the imperfectness of the system. That is what determines societies that are sane and societies that are not insane. That's just different. The attitude, the response, the reaction.
Here you are, Teju, you are in the US now. Was it easy? I mean, you just just went into the system. You didn't have to go through anything. All the system, everything was waiting for you. It was plug and play. It is you now, Teju. Abi?
Well, the immigration part of it, the being legal in the country part of it was easy. I came with what is known as an exceptional ability visa because I am who I am. So we never had any problems. In fact, as I told you, I had the US valid visa already in my passport. So when they say JAPA, I laugh at them. JAPA is for people who had visiting visas and they ran away. JAPA is not for me who had visiting visas going back 10 to 12 years and then applied for an exceptional ability visa in addition to my visitor's visa. In fact, it was when we got in that the guy at the immigration in the US looked at my visitor's visa, my wife and I, and looked at our exceptional ability visas and then canceled the visitor's visa that was still valid. Yeah. So as far as the immigration into the system was getting legal, I mean, that was all the way from Lagos. Again, this is me. I would never have left Nigeria in the first place without sorting that out. But as far as life and living and existence, there is no promised land without passing through the wilderness, at the very least, because you roll in the same circles that we all roll in. I'm not saying you did, but you might have sat maybe one time in a circle where they might have mentioned me and mentioned the fact that my career was dead or on its way to dying. Because you don't take 2-3 years off in entertainment and go to the United States and have no consequences. So there was a time when it seemed that indeed I was finished, right? In fact, I will never forget a news article that somebody wrote, Teju Babyface seeks greener pastures in the US. And they wrote about how I left for America. In their words, maybe it was that while he didn't explain why he was leaving, it might not be unconnected to his inability to make headway in his career. Almighty, me, inability to make headway. Now I can laugh about it now, but at the time that it came out, it wasn't funny because it was during that time that I was really silent and I didn't know what to do next. It was a case of it was COVID. I couldn't go forward and I couldn't go backward to Nigeria. I couldn't go back and do the show. And I didn't know what to do here in the United States. And I'd spent nearly all my Naira savings. At this point, we're exchanging Naira at over 400 to dollars. I had a wife who was not working and twin children in the United States. And this is a year and a half, almost 2 years down the line. Please, you to do the math now for me. So my savings and my reserves were just about gone. I was almost done and finished. right? And then this news report came out. The Yoruba say, "Bi ìyà ńlá bá ṣán ni mọ́lẹ̀, ìyà kéékèèké náà á mọ́ gorí ẹni." So while I'm trying to figure out this existential crisis of my life, then that news report came out that I left because I wasn't making headway with my career and all of that, which makes sense. Who leaves all of that Teju Babyface show behind and then comes to the United States, right? So yeah, there were those existential crises for me. What are we going to eat? What are we going to drink? How are we going to move on and all of that, So there were times when it was really, really close. When it was close, again, what begins to mess with your mind is the rent system. By the time you pay rent here for 6 months, it occurs to you that, the amount of money I've spent on rent here, I would have used it to buy a house in any part of Lagos. Or if I was paying rent, I'd have been living in Banana Island. This is what I've just spent on rent in this just middle class neighborhood in the United States. Right? So there you are kind of stuck. You realize that the system is good for your family. Your kids have better healthcare. You're able to walk with them on the street. You're able to take them to the playground. You're able to be involved in the life of your kids. You're able to live in a house where you don't have fences, you don't have burglary and all of that. Again, I go to that whole Nigerian thing where people say, well, there's no way that is safe. Again, observations that come from, I don't want to be insulting, but observations that come from a place of lack of thought process. This is my house without burglary on the window. And you are telling me that because there's nowhere that is safe, where I'm coming from and where I am are comparable. Where in my place, I have to have a fence and burglary proof and may guards and police at the gates. You're actually willing to compare this. Anyway, I digress. So yes, it wasn't always seamless. And in the bid to make money, you get insulted in subtle ways and not so subtle. Because people assume that for you to have come to the United States must mean that you are finished. So Nigerians here, they offer you MC gigs. They will pay you 200. They will pay. Somebody once offered me $50. As far as she was concerned, yes, to come and MC a party. So it's a real humbling experience. And then they tell you stuff like, well, we have another MC that we're going to use, but somebody mentioned that Teju Babyface is here now. So since he's here now, yes, he should be able to do it. So we just said, look, if you're not doing anything, we have our MCO. In fact, my event planner was even saying to me that, Teju Babyface, I don't know if you can MCO, but well, I just said, so our budget was $50, but because they said it's you, we'll give you 150. And you're like, So these things happen. It wasn't easy. But the way to the promised land was never going to be easy anyway. So you keep motoring on. And as I said, when I go back to the beginning, part of the harvest of all of that, or part of the product of all of that, or part of the end product of all of that is that we're now in the era where I'm now podcasting, which is the way that I should actually have gone. But I would never have come to that decision if I'd never left Nigeria and gone through that period. So yes, it wasn't easy, but I didn't have to take up employment. And I'm not judging those who did. In fact, it's in Yoruba that I can say it's me ofi. I just I couldn't, even if I wanted to. My exceptional ability visa had strict terms. You are Teju Babyface, you are the king of talk, you're comedian, talk show host. That is what you said you're coming to do. That is why you're here. So do that. Yeah, so I didn't even have the little room. Who knows? Maybe during the darkest days and the darkest nights, maybe I would have been tempted to go and find something to do, but I never had to deal with that. I never had those options anyway. So yeah.
So specifically, what did you do?
You said?
I said specifically, what did you do?
Oh, nothing. I was just here. I mean, like I said, there was look, the Teju Babyface show really did well. Yeah, it did well. In fact, it did better after I left, which was one of the things that messed with my head again. The Teju Babyface show did better after I left. It was after I left, and all those shows and episodes that were programmed to go on air, they just took off with advertising after I left. The money just took off, yeah? So this is the part where you start asking about life. Was this an action of the gods who now knew that I was in America and would need more naira to convert to dollar? So was this a largesse of the gods who now increased our earnings on the Teju Babyface show so that that could happen? Or should I never have left? Did I make a mistake by leaving? Should I have stayed? And then this increased largesse in earnings would have enabled me to do more in Nigeria with the Teju Babyface show. So the resistance in your mind comes to mess with you big time at this point. Yeah. So I was there thinking again that, did I make a mistake by leaving? This during COVID. So there was that money coming in from that. So I never had to take up employment or really think about it at any point in time. Really, I never. It was just that money. At some point, we had to tighten our belts, batten down the hatches, stop spending on frivolities, cut down expenses here and there, as you might imagine. Yeah, but that was essentially it. It was entertainment. And then the things I was doing here as well. Remember again that I republished my 2 books as 1 volume again. I was clear, even though I had my moments of doubt, but I was always clear that my constituents and the constituency that I was supposed to serve was Nigeria and Nigerians and Africa as an extension. Everything about me speaks to that. In this chart alone, I must have employed several proverbs. I'm going to employ another saying, Umi Nigeria ni mo buwe, oni mo bumu. I am sent to those people. I've never been in doubt of that. What has been clear to me, or the area in which I've now gained further clarity, is that I don't necessarily have to be in Nigeria, the geographical space, every time. Technology advancements have now afforded us the opportunity to be able to touch Nigerians all over the world, regardless of location. And once I came to that realization, then that began to form the basis and the thesis for which I started to do the other things that I needed to do. I say all of this to say that, so going to get employment in another place in the United States, from what I could see, I knew that that was going to take me away from that drive, because that sucks you in. You always need to be on point with that. You don't want to be fired. You want to get promoted. You want to be the best. So it's the case of not being able to serve 2 masters at the same time. Some people seem to have managed it well, but for what I was called to do, it seemed that it would be hard for me to do that. So I wasn't really considering it. And as I've said, I didn't even have the options anyway.
How easy is it for you to get the people, to get guests on your podcast?
Fortunately for me, again, this is where so with all humility, I am who I am. All these years that I've spent in the industry, you build up not only relationship capital, you also build up reputational capital. It occurred to me when I started the podcast, and this is one of the reasons why you have to defeat resistance in your head and do whatever you need to do. Even if you're wrong, give it a try first. That's if anybody watches this and they want to take just one thing away from this. If you have an idea and you're convinced you should do it, regardless of how fearful you are, try it. If it's not going to work, you're going to know once you do it. Yeah, as I told you, I always thought that stopping the big Teju Babyface show would be a step down and that nobody would accept any other thing from me. Come to find out that there are guests who have just always wanted to be interviewed by Teju Babyface, regardless of where he does it. They just want to speak to him, right? So with the relationship capital that one has built over decades in the industry, with the reputational and professional capital that one has also built, it's not been very hard, actually. It's you call people up and they're like, yeah, let's do it. The challenge has been more of trying to coordinate time zones and technologies and all of that. See, we've had about 2 or 3 breaks now. Yeah, it's not always easy to do those things. Yeah, so the people themselves are not a problem.
Okay, and I must also say to you too that I'm also honored that you're speaking to me right now. I know that you normally don't grant interview. I'm not even sure you've granted any interview any TV interview since you relocated.
No, and will not do it. So this was how that came about. I granted a couple print and I regretted it. I granted print. In fact, I just, after the last one, I was just like, nah, never doing this again. Never, ever. So this goes to what I spoke about. This is relationship capital. We go way back. I mean, we go way back, number one. And then number two, I trust you to do justice to this interview. I trust you not to remove the most sagacious, controversial line out of context and just stick it up there, you know. But even if you do, hey, it's another reason for me to redouble my convictions not to grant interview. So, yeah, but you are almighty.
I was watching one of your videos recently, and where you were talking about people with entitlement mentality, talking about forgiveness and what has happened in the past. And you mentioned that there was a time when you were down and out and people didn't know that you were going through a moment like that. Can you relate to me? What period were you talking about when you said you were down? And was there a particular period in your life that we consider, if you ask, okay, look, I have 10 moments when I was down and out. This is number one.
Well, it's so I alluded to it already. It's always when I do this, when I start to do this, my crazy killing one level to go to the next level. So usually it happens in that gap, usually. But my comedy journey was not particularly easy, really. I didn't get the opportunities that, in fact, when all is said and done, I think I ought to be congratulated for even making any mark as a comedian at all, that I rose to become one of the highest paid MCs in Nigeria at some point. I was one of the top comedians. Is a testimony and testament to not my resilience, but to how the universe and the pantheon of gods must like and favor me. Because while I got opportunities and I'm grateful for them, I didn't get a lot of the opportunities that put comedians on the map in those days. Now, because I have learned from life not to mention names, I'm not going to mention names. As a younger person, I'd have mentioned names, but there's no need. But there were certain comedy festivals and shows back when we're coming up that you had to be on, or that if you were on, they made your fame. They just grew your fame and your popularity. And I was locked out of almost all those festivals. So I wasn't on the VCDs, I wasn't on the DVDs, I wasn't on the video cassettes. I was on one video cassette earlier on, but after that, for almost a decade, I was just never called back. Yeah, so it was hard for me. In fact, I remember some event I went to when Who Wants to Be a Millionaire started, and Ultima Studios was trying to present, produce that. I was the comedian that they got first of all to come and entertain the audience in the breaks. So it was Frank Edoho and I. If you watch my interview with Frank Edoho, we joked about that, we spoke about that. So I would perform every Saturday while they were recording the first season of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and even the second season. And one day there was a technical break. There was a production break that went on for so long, and I performed and I entertained the audience for what seemed like hours. Must have been about 45, 50 minutes. I finished them. And one elderly man came to me afterwards. He said, "You're the best comedian I've seen in a long time." This might have been about 5, 6 years after we'd been doing comedy, right? When we were the guys on scene. We were the guys. This was after all our mother. This was when we were the guys, we were the guys. I had done my first show by this time. I'd bought my second car by this time. I was Teju Babyface by this time. The old man said, "But you're the best comedian I've seen in a long time, but I have never heard about you before. You know what? Why don't you roll around with some of your senior colleagues?" And then he started to mention not only my contemporaries, he mentioned people that had started after me, or people whom had started after me. I won't mention their names. So why don't you roll around with some of your senior colleagues? Like, started to count them up. I'm like, yeah, these ones, my senior colleagues. So I asked him, I said, "How did you arrive at this conclusion, sir?" He said, "Yeah, because I see them on videos, I see them around and all of that, and I never see you." And my mind said to me that, "Shut up, all the places where comedians appear, don't appear." I wasn't given the opportunity, but somehow we still made it. So there were those difficult times. In fact, the example I should give you, the perfect example, is that now I will mention a name because he said this not derogatorily. He said this in encouragement. It was Frank Nweke Jr., the former federal minister for communication, I think. He was the director general of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. I think that was the name of that group. And they really liked me. I was their principal MC for a couple of years, right? I did all of their events. Frank Nweke Jr. called me one day in 2011, or might have been 2010. So I want you to put this in perspective. All this time you're talking about all this motherland thing that we're doing, you're talking of 2003, 4, 5. Yeah. So he called me one day in 2010, just after the Teju Babyface show had started, by the way. The Teju Babyface show had started, by the way. I had interviewed King Sonny Ade, the First Lady of Lagos, Asha, and all of that. He called me one day and he said, oh boy, I'm annoyed with you. I said, Uncle Frank, what did I do? He said, I'm in a meeting here where we're considering MCs for another event, for even a bigger event. And I find that I am having to defend your craft and how good you are to the organizers here. It's like, I can't believe that people just don't know how good you are. You are doing a terrible job. It's like, you must be doing a terrible job of your own PR. How don't they know how good you are? I'm like, Uncle Frank, it's not a terrible job, sir. As Uncle Frank, I am on TV. I'm on TV every week. You know me. You've seen me work. So how can that be terrible PR? He said, well, that's true. Well, something somewhere is not right. I'm like, I couldn't explain it, sir. I just can't explain it. But it is what it is. So, but eventually I figured what it is. It is that I am work in progress. Everything that I have done is not where I am supposed to be. It's just that I'm so gifted with all humility that when it comes to talking, I can make any expression of talk work to a certain extent. You make me an actor, I can make it work. And then you're impressed. You make me a comedian, I can make it work. You make me an MC, I can make it work. You make me a talk show host, I can make it work. You make me an interviewer, I can make it work. If you make me a pastor tomorrow, I will make it work. Hence the title, The King of Talk. We just didn't arrive at that haphazardly or arbitrarily. It's my talent, right? But all of these expressions are not the ultimate use of that talent. You will soon see what the ultimate use of that talent is. That is work in progress. And then when I arrive there, I will finally get the ultimate. It's not that I lack recognition, as it were. It's not that I lack craving recognition. It's that when you are in the ultimate place, though, all the things that are supposed to align finally align, and it is clear that you're who you're supposed to be. And I'm not quite in that place yet, even with all the successes that it might have seemed, or it might seem like I'm enjoying right now. So yeah, those will be the challenges.
Okay, now let me now take it back for those who do not know, because I like to tell a lot of stories. I like history a lot. You were in Diamond Ring, 1998.
Yes, sir.
I think that was your first film, and you played.
Yeah, my first incursion into entertainment, really.
Yeah, your first time into entertainment. No, that came after Theater 15. You were already doing Theater 15.
Well, apologies to my people for not considering us as incursion. Yes, it was Theater 15 first in University of Lagos. Yes, 1990.
I've been your fan for so long, so I can actually write your story.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, okay. Yeah, Theater 15.
Okay, so 1998 you did Diamond Ring. I mean, and it wasn't just a waka pass role. How did that happen?
Great. Before I answer your question as to how did that happen, let me use that particular background to further buttress the point I made in the last question. I did Diamond Ring. The movie was great, right? I acted well, yeah? Everybody loved it. So how come I never got another role after Diamond Ring? Which wasn't for lack of trying, by the way. It wasn't for lack of trying. I went everywhere. Or I went to a lot of places.
So what happened?
Again, I can't tell you. It's that thing, it's that resistance in life. It was Fred Amata that gave an explanation that worked to an extent. Fred Amata said, look, you have started your acting career where most people go to end their own. He said people act for years hoping to get into a production with either Tade Ogidon or Amaka Igwe or Tunde Kelani. He said that's where you went to start. He said you went to start where people want to end. So really, there's no space for you to grow. He said number one. He said number two. He said look at you. He said you be fine boy now. He said you be fine boy. He said you not see the movies where they do right now. We they do ritualistic movies now. Where they want to cast you for exactly that kind movie. But having said that, a year later or 2 years later, it was about a year and a half later actually, without her knowing, unbeknownst to her, Amaka Igwe cast me again in a lead role in a television series opposite RMD again. It was going to be the biggest thing Nigeria had ever seen after Checkmate. But again, for some reason, after acting a season and a half, that thing never really made TV. It was called Solitaire. It went on NTA too late. It went on NTA for a year, about 4 years or so after we had acted it, and then we never saw it again. Right? So you're bringing up what Diamond Drink just says, look, I have had this resistance that has used people as tools to try to frustrate me at several points during my career. But I understand, or I understood that it was resistance, even though I might not have been able to put it in these words in those days. So I don't hold it against people. It's just that these things happen to keep pushing us on. If my acting career had worked out now, then I never would have been a comedian. If my comedy career had gone to the heights that I really wanted, I would never have started the Teju Babyface show. Trust me. If my comedy career had done the things that I had in mind that I wanted it to do, you would never have seen the Teju Babyface show. So I don't hold those things against people, as it were. Now, to answer your question as to how I came by Diamond Ring, we must always thank life for the resistance and the good part. The same way that I cannot dial down what the resistance is that comes against me. I mean, I know what it is now, but the same way I couldn't speak as well, I wouldn't say I'm eloquent. I stutter sometimes. So the same way I couldn't break it down years ago, the way I've broken it down now is the same way too that I couldn't have broken down the lock that brought me Diamond Drink. It was nothing that I did. I was just in Theater 15, and Teju Babyface was looking to cast somebody in a role. And they told him that there was a theater group in University of Lagos that he should go look at them. And he came. The moment he saw me, regardless of whether I could act or not, Teju Babyface made up his mind that I am going to make this boy act. This is the guy I'm looking for. He has the look. He was the one for whom I wrote the script. So I like to tell people that I'm not a great actor. It was Teju Babyface that whatever you watched in Diamond Ring that you loved, 100% of that, of the flowers, 100% of that credit should be laid at the feet of the master director, Teju Babyface. So it was nothing that I did. It was just serendipity. It was fortuitous. It was the universe. It was the pantheon of gods. It was life. So as with resistance, as with angels, the two sides, you can take one and leave the other one.
Okay. I also remember that you used to be with Alibaba. In fact, you used to say that you were almost like an apprentice under Alibaba. How did that one go?
Oh, I was definitely an apprentice. I was definitely an apprentice. So when my acting career started to stall, quite a few acting jobs. In fact, between Diamond Ring and Amaka Igwe's Solitaire, I did another job that was called One Too Much, which was where I met a young actor called Desmond Elliott. And I was the star in his eyes then. Teju of Diamond Ring, so Desmond Elliott and I acted in a series called One Too Much that we recorded in First Tag. And he also went on TV back in those days, yeah? And then I was also on stage. So look at all the things that resistance did to me. The great stage director, Felix Okolo, whom I have not seen for years. I don't know where Felix Okolo is. Felix Okolo at the time was about the biggest stage director in Nigeria. So he came again to University of Lagos to work with Theater 15. And he saw me. I just had this thing that directors are able to spot and like. It's what Teju Babyface saw, it's what Amaka Igwe saw. Felix Okolo saw it. And he plugged me from University of Lagos to go to National Arts Theatre to start acting for a play that he wanted to present at the National Arts Festival in Abuja. So I was acting opposite the late thespian Funsho Alabi. So Uncle Funsho Alabi was in there and I was there as well. And they were teaching me the rudiments of acting. And we're acting this thing. My friends back in school were jealous. It was like, I can imagine, why this guy? Only you did Diamond Ring. Then Felix Okolo has come now and he has plugged you out again. I was in final year at that time, so I'd leave school and go to Igomu and then would act and all of that. Long story short, again, the show never saw the air. The funding for the show was pulled. The sponsorship for the show was pulled again. So after all of this, I'm like, hey, wow, this acting thing, maybe there's not. So I want to do comedy now. Primarily because TA was in Theater 15 too. And TA had started his comedy about the time I'd started acting. You know, he had started earlier before me, but about the same time. Because he was just 1 year ahead of me in Unilag. And so while I had gone off to do Diamond Ring and all of that, he had gone off to be with Alibaba. And so when we seemed to return after the turn of the seasons, TA returned with a car and money, holding the motto at Owo. And he moved out of the hall and went to get a boys' quarters, which was the very pinnacle of big boy living in University of Lagos, to live in a boys' quarters. And I didn't have money. I didn't have anything. I'm like, nah, is this comedy that I want to do? No. I can do this comedy, right? So Kayode Peters, who was also in Theater 15, had met Basoj somewhere, Basoj Taria. So he introduced me to Basoj. And it was Basoj that formed the foundation of my entire comedy career. Having worked with Basoj for a while, I'd also moonlight with Julius Agu, who had also come to Unilag and seen me in Theater 15, and he liked me as well. So I'd moonlight with Julius Agu. So with the help of both of those gentlemen, when I did Night of 1,000 Laughs and I met Basket Mouth invited me to do a show for him in Benin City. So when I did the show in Benin City, that was where Ali Baba saw me, because Ali Baba came for Basket Mouth, because Ali had met Basket Mouth and he had started to mentor Basket Mouth. So when Ali saw me there, Basket Mouth introduced me to Ali, and that's how Basket Mouth and I started to work with Ali. And that's how I met Ali. We used to roll around with Ali every day. So I essentially graduated from the school of Basoj to move to the school of Ali. And when I graduated from the school of Ali, and I was now a full-blown comedian, I moved not into the school of TA, but into the company of TA. Whatever Ali Baba taught me as a mentor, it was TA that helped me cement it as a professional. So I didn't go to TA as a mentee. I went to TA as a colleague, but because TA already had, a structure, he had structure. So TA just pulled me in. I used his offices. I drove his cars. I slept in his houses, and I mean houses. His mother's house, his own flat, his girlfriend's house. I mean, so without those men, I wouldn't be anywhere. Basoj, Julius, Ali, TA. If I leave anybody out, forgive me.
Okay. So I have this, as if I knew that we were going to talk mentors today. So I brought two of your books. This one, Secrets of the Streets. You signed this was 2017, then Forget Principles, Find the Mentor.
Yeah.
Both of them have been made into one book.
Yes, now. They're one book now, they're one volume now.
There's one volume now. Okay, so but I like this one, Forget Principles, Find the Mentor. So if I were to ask you now, who would you call your mentor?
I have no mentors anymore.
Why? But you told us to find a mentor.
Yeah, at some point. So that's what I left out of that book. And this is what so again, my journey to the United States and the forced incarceration, in air quotes, in the United States has afforded me the opportunity to learn lessons that I needed to be able to surmount the next stage of my life, right? Because I have a lot to give to the world. And I needed to come to a place of silence and solitude for life to teach me those lessons. And that is what the United States has been for me, as it were. If I had to add to that book, you need mentors. Without mentors, you're not going to get anywhere, but you need them foundationally. There is a reason why the sages of the ages say that a fool at 40 is a fool forever. And I believe that the flip side of that saying, I believe they are twin sayings. The flip side of that saying is the very popular axiom, life begins at 40. It is that by the time you're circa 40, approaching 40, perhaps a few years after 40, you should have figured out enough about yourself and your life to be able to stand on your own and by yourself, to be able to make your decisions. You should have been mentored by able and worthy men, so that by the time you come to 40, you should be able to stand alone by yourself. When you're 40, about then, it may be earlier, it may be later, you should be able to cut off those ties, and while still respecting your mentors, and while still deferring to people who know more than you, there should be an area of life where you are the authority. And it's not as if you know everything. It's just that you should be confident enough by now, at that point, to be able to make your own decisions for better or for worse. And as I always say, at this point in my life, I would rather be wrong in my own decision than to be right with somebody else's advice. You might be right, but I would rather be wrong in my own decision than to be right with your own advice. Why? Because I've served time with my mentors. I've paid my dues. A child must grow up at some point. You must stand on your own, which is why we leave our parents to go set up a family. And we don't call them every day, Daddy, my wife said, Mommy, my husband said, make your own decisions. So for all intents and purposes, I still have mentors in that sense. Basoj, Ali Baba, they will always be my comedy mentors. Leke Older, Samade Yemi, they will always be my business and spiritual mentors in those seasons. But right now, going forward, the universe is my mentor. I am my own mentor. I have no mentors.
Okay. One person that you talk about a lot, maybe not in interviews, but I know that you talk a lot about him, is your dad, your late dad.
I was about to add that, but I didn't want to cut you out. My ultimate mentor would always be my father, Prince Badegesho Yelakin, because what all those other people did, he combined. If I speak any English that you like, if I speak any Yoruba that you like, if I sing any Yoruba songs that you like, if I do anything that you like, essentially, that man, it must be traced to that man.
I remember there was a time you told me, let me see if I'm correct now, maybe at one of those low moments, if I'm right, that you had to go back home or something like that. Am I right about that? That you had to go back to the house in
yeah, all the stupid things that I was, again, all the stupid, I've done some really stupid and harebrained things, and I've said this in quite a few interviews. Again, you see, that's the downside of mentorship, but it's the downside that is an upside, because those are the downsides that help you to come to the decision where you eventually pull away from mentors and say, I'm going to stand on my own. I've done some silly things because I listened to some people, and this doesn't refer to the gentlemen whom I've mentioned already. I mean, it's just that I was reading a lot of books, I was listening to a lot of people. That's what, if you have a heart for mentoring, you necessarily open yourself up to receiving education from many people. So you read many books, you listen to many tapes, you watch many videos. And so I was going through a period of my life where I bought into one of the most insidious principles to have ever been foisted on the sons of men: sowing seed. Yeah, you sow seed. So I will carry my car and give you, in the hopes that God will return a bigger car to me. And I bought into that foolishness at a point. And that thing set me back. Again, I'm just one who is favored by the gods, which is why I've been able to, recoup. If I could go back, if I knew then what I know now, with the resources I had then, So it was during one of those silly periods when I'd sold what I had. I had given what I had. I had sold everything. I was now almost done. Then I had to move back to my father's house. You see, again, this is why suffering is good. The Yoruba say, maybe it is because Badegesho Yelakin was well-to-do and he had a big house in Shogunle. Maybe that's why I was able to move back. If I had come like most people from the village, maybe suffering would have taught me that having gotten to a point where you've rented your own flat and you've bought a car, you don't give it away. But again, when you come up pampered and life has been kind to you early, you become arrogant. You think you have a golden touch. So you do silly things. So that was me doing silly things during those days, harebrained things, thinking I was special.